All right, let's try this guy again, Zana. How about it? Anthony Gargano, how are you?
Hey, buddy, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened, Pat.
All right, I bet you we'll see. It's probably cable. You're probably 5 minutes late with your cable payment there, Anthony. You know what that means. All right.
I'm still one of the rare Comcast people. I still have my Comcast.
All right. Listen, I got a lot of things for you now. We got a little compressed time here. Let's get right to it. Is there a path you see for the Eagles to make, based on how they've played recently? Is there a path for them to make a deep postseason run?
I mean, we're talking Super Bowl. I don't see it. I mean, the biggest problem is defense, right? Like listen, if they get the offense, I think they can get the offense figured out and get back to where they were rolling. I mean, at times this year, they have been doing that. So I don't think that's a stretch. But, can this defense, particularly the back end and that back seven, not get exploited by some of the quarterbacks that are in the NFC? I have my doubts. I think that's ultimately what's going to kill them.
Well, certainly the defense is a problem. How do you think it fell apart so, I want to say quickly, really over the last 6 weeks? What do you think it was that all of a sudden caused the team to go from 10-1 to go 1-5 in its last 6? Is it just the players on the field, or do you think the coaching shakeup? How did you see it falling out?
Well, listen, I think it's twofold. One, I think defensively, the front wore down, right? Like they were, you could see after that gauntlet that a lot of those guys were spent when they faced all those teams. And I think that took a lot out of them. And this team lives by its front, right? Like you need to pressure the quarterback because of the back end. Slay gets hurt, right? Safeties get exposed. The new guys come in and they don't really, it's not what we'd hope for, right? Like you think Byard would make a little bit of a difference, that maybe, that Shaq would make a little bit of a difference. It really never happened. And then offensively, to your point, I just think predictability is real. Like when you're talking about fans guessing the next play, I mean, you got to look in the mirror. There's some issues there. I think offensively they were not as potent as they were last year, and I think ultimately that came down to get them. I mean, look at that offense at times. I mean, all of a sudden they couldn't handle a blitz. That's what was so puzzling.
I know, and that is true. And we talked about that. I talked about that a lot with Sal, and he mentioned it on the show tonight. Was you can look for Tampa to blitz during the national anthem. That is clearly going to happen a great deal. All right, so let's talk about Jalen Hurts for a minute. I asked Sal if he saw a regression in Hurts' play. I'll ask you the same question. I thought this guy was really earmarked for stardom, and he still is. He's still a top-flight NFL quarterback. But clearly, as you mentioned, the spontaneity seems to have gone out of this offense. How much do you lay on the feet of number one?
I would lay more on the coaching staff, but and Jalen definitely has culpability. We break down the film, Baldy and I, for our NFL show on the All City Network, and we break down all that film deeply. He's been missing guys. He's been late. He's been missing guys. Their offense hasn't clicked the way it is. Some of it's play calling, like we talked about, but he hasn't really played that well. And I've seen him play better. I've seen him be more accurate. I've seen him recognize things quicker. Right? He just doesn't look as dominant as he was last year. That defense, and he was a bigger part of the run game too. And I think that also helped him. Right? That also helped when he was a bigger part of the run game. That helps the pass, right? Because that's just going to buy you more time. He's not fared well against the blitz, like we've talked about. Part of it's coaching, but it's also part of it's him recognizing.
Yeah. 8 picks against the blitz this year by Jalen Hurts, worst in the NFL, or the most in the NFL. And I think, as you mentioned, Todd Bowles, the Bucs love the blitz anyway. They are going to bring the house. The Eagles have got to run the ball. Do you see Philadelphia committing to that Monday night?
Listen, of course they have to run the ball. And, in the past, they haven't been shy to do it. In the past, they've run the ball. It's not like that this coaching staff has always been averse to the run game. And, it was been weird because the way the season started, the way Swift was such a big weapon.
I know.
And it was weird. It was, and I don't know if that's Brian Johnson, who's the OC, who goes away quicker, or if it's the offense itself with Nick, where they'll go back to certain plays. But they've kind of abandoned ship. If the run game's not working early, they kind of get away from it, and that can't happen. We saw. It's funny. 2 years ago, right? This was the House of Horrors in the playoff game. Tampa. It was Brady, but really, the Tampa defense just harassed Jalen. He had one of his worst games. That was one of the reasons why people were suddenly unsure about what Jalen could be. And then, of course, last year he's stellar, and they go to the Super Bowl. But it's odd that they're going back to that same place. So it's they're going to blitz him.
Of course, Swift's best game of the year was in Tampa in Week 4. So there is the Eagles should learn from recent history. All right, now a word about the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, because the microwave is turned on, and on a guy that has taken this team to the playoffs in all of the 3 years that he's been the head coach, including a very, very close Super Bowl loss. And yet, Anthony, the pressure is on him right now, full blast. How much do you think, let me ask you this, do you think that Nick Sirianni is capable of hitting the right switches to turn this around for Philadelphia Monday night?
Yeah, I do. I listen, I thought he was bright. I liked a lot of the stuff that Nick brought to the table. And I'm not going to just say he forgot how to coach over the last 6 games and, fire him. I know there's a lot of pressure that if they don't win Monday night, that some change needs to happen, especially with the way the landscape of the NFL has been between Carroll and Belichick and all the movement. I would guess that the Eagles would say, "Hey, look, we got to replace our coordinators, and we'll start there." But I don't think this is a situation where all of a sudden he can't coach. Yeah. I mean, I listen. I believe in Sirianni. I think he's got to. I think he's got to mature a little bit, become a little more seasoned.
I think you're right about that, Anthony. I think you're right. The maturity thing. I think he's some ways he's his own worst enemy. Right? We all think of the classic NFL coaches, Tom Landry with the fedora and the sport jacket and the tie, and this guy always looks like he forgot to shave, and he's going back and forth with opposing fans. And I think when the going gets really tough and when the heat gets turned up full blast, that comes back and adversely impacts his perception. Do you agree with that?
I mean, to a point. I think the season piece of it, I think, Pat, that's more of it. The youthful stuff, I think that's his DNA. I mean, honestly, I think he's a fiery guy, and I think that's partly what fuels him. So him jabbering and all that stuff, I just think that's kind of who he is. That's just part of his DNA. He's just going to get back to it. And I'll be honest with you, I thought he should have took the play calling back. Yeah. I think, it should have been, Mike McCarthy did that with the Cowboys. And I thought Nick should have took the play calling back as this thing started to reel down the stretch and said, "I'm the head coach. I'll fix it."
All right. Well, we'll see how he does it. All right, AG, I got 30 seconds left here. How do you see Monday night? Do you see Philadelphia moving on to a possible date in San Francisco next week?
Man, I don't. I'm worried. I really am. I think it's going to be a tough game. Yeah. And I mean, I worry about the back end. I think we're going to be sweating if they win.
How about that? Yeah, because by the back end, you mean Mike Evans.
I mean, secondary, Evans, Godwin, Cole, again, Kate Otten. I just worry about that.
All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out. Now, tell me, you mentioned the show you do with Brian Bollinger. Where do people find Anthony Gargano, and where can we keep track of what you're up to?
Thanks, Pat. It's All City Network. It's the All NFL podcast, the Meat Locker with Baldy and myself. Yeah. And soon in April, we'll be doing our show on PHLY. So I always love you, Pat. You do a great job. You're a good football man.
Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Love to have you back here, and look forward, and congratulations and best of luck to you in the new pursuits.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Hopefully, we get to continue the playoffs. So.
All right, Anthony. Thanks very much. Great, Anthony Gargano joining me here on This Week in Pro Football. When we get back, Coach is going to join me, Coach Vermeil, and we are going to talk about, obviously, playoff coaching in the crucible that is the NFL playoffs. We're going to do that next on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.